Well, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's Business Success Series presented by Manulife. What to consider when reopening your office. My name is Ian McLean, and I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Kitchener-Waterloo Chamber of Commerce. Before we get started, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that we do live and work on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples, as we seek a renewed relationship based on a foundation of mutual understanding and respect. As participants in today's virtual event, we are coming together as one. We believe everyone is free to be their true self and receive the same respect and opportunity regardless of age, ethnicity, gender, culture, identity, sexual orientation, beliefs, or language. We hope you will join us in fostering a positive environment here today that is a safe and welcoming space for all. We know there is more to do, and we are committed to listening, learning, and growing as we go. Today's session would not be possible without the continued support of our members, but also in particular of our sponsors. So a special thank you today to our title sponsor for the Business Success Series, Manulife. Our platinum sponsor for the series is the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and September sponsor, Gowling WLG. These organizations are committed to supporting our local economy and providing businesses with the resources and tools they need to thrive and survive. Just before the session starts, I'd like to go over a few quick reminders. Please ensure your microphone is muted throughout the presentation so we can reduce background noise. If you have a tech-related question, please comment in the chat section, and a representative of my team will get back to you right away. If you have a question for today's speakers, they'll be gathered throughout the session, and our speakers will do their best to answer as many questions as possible following the presentation. I'll keep an eye on that chat function and try and incorporate them into the questions that we have planned. All attendees will be sent a recording of today's presentation. It will be also made available on the Greater KW Chamber website. I would now like to invite my friend Nina Gupta, partner at Gowling WLG, to introduce today's speakers. Nina.
Well, thank you, Ian. Gowling WLG is definitely proud to be this month's presenting sponsor of the Business Success Series. And as you heard, my name is Nina Gupta. I'm one of the partners specializing in employment, labor, and equities law, meaning I help local and international businesses with their workforce questions. If you've been in downtown Kitchener recently on King Street, you may have seen our brand new office across from the ever important LCBO. Great location, Ian. Please feel free to come and see us if you have any legal questions related to your business. I like to think that we are your international right in your backyard. I have the privilege today of introducing today's dynamic and wonderful guests, Charlene Hofbauer, Simon Chan, and Andrea Verbanek. So starting with Andrea has spent her career partnering with leadership teams to help their organizations succeed through their people. She's passionate about combining culture, innovation, leadership, inclusiveness to create workplaces that people love and employee experiences that are truly engaging. As the VP People and Culture at Xonify, Andrea serves as a trusted partner, supporting operational and strategic human resources needs and helping the company achieve its business goals. Simon Chan is currently the Vice President Talent, Academy, and Future Work at Communitech, which is a well-known private and public innovation hub in Kitchener-Waterloo that supports a community of 1,500 companies from startups to scale-ups to large global players. He is responsible for the leadership of the Talent and Communitech Academy teams who support talent attraction, learning and development programs, and events for Communitech member companies. He also led the development of a future work and learning coalition with partners from academia, private and public sector in Waterloo Region to build a community of practice to help future-proof organizations. Welcome, Simon. And finally, last but not least, Charlene Hofbauer, who brings 11 years of experience in workforce planning and development to the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo, Wellington, Dufferin, and is very excited to be leading the organization in its 25th year of operations. Charlene is a strong believer that in order to overcome the challenges, presented by today's rapidly changing labor market. We need to get together across communities and across industries to identify where we can work together and where we need individualized solutions. She brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in human resources, training, program development, and education to her work in Waterloo Region. So please, I'm looking forward to this discussion. Please join me in welcoming Andrea, Charlene, and Simon. Back to you, Ian.
Well, thank you, Nina. And today, I guess this falls into the three F's. It's fall. I hate to say that. I hope no one gets angry that we have. I mean, I know it's officially summer, but we're back into the grind of fall. That I'm amongst friends. Charlene and I work very closely together with the Workforce Planning Board and the Immigration Partnership, and Simon, obviously, with Communitech and certainly the future of work and learning. We've been working on that with the Chamber and the partners that are part of that, which is so incredibly important to business of all size in Waterloo Region. Of course, Andrea, the partnership that Exonify has with both our chambers around our Chamber Business Ready and partnering with tools that business need to get through this pandemic. And I would also say, in probably as a career saving role here, that Andrea is on the board of the Greater KW Chamber of Commerce and is on the executive committee. So I'm always especially nice to Andrea when I see her, but we are amongst friends today. But we want to talk about the future today, and the future is now. I think when we got started on this, Simon, the Future of Work and Learning Coalition, and you and Ian Klugman and others kind of got us involved at the Chamber with U of W and some of the other founding partners. We were talking about the future of work and learning as if it was something kind of out there. I think one of the observations is we were living the future sooner than lots of other people in Waterloo Region because of the innovative culture, the diversity of the economy that we have. And then COVID hit and the future became right now. We're all working differently than we ever have in the past. So let's start with the Future of Work Coalition, and then we'll dig into the practical part, which is what most of the people that will watch this today and as they see it online, those small and medium-sized business, how do they actually practically do this understand and get excited about what the future is, because it's coming whether we like it or not. So Simon, Communitech has been the backbone of this initiative. It's your baby. You've taken this and you've really given some leadership to this. Tell us about the work that the coalition has done, and then I'll actually, because Andrea and Charlene are also part of that, but get us started with how this started and a little bit of the background.
Sure, Ian, thanks. And I think you're absolutely right. The background's really interesting because we started having some of these conversations around the future of work back in January of 2019, right? And we thought at that point in time, regionally, we'd have 5-10 years to adapt to a lot of the changes we were seeing in the workplace. So really where it started was just a series of conversations with leaders of organizations, leaders from Manulife, University of Waterloo, Chamber, Exonify, Workforce Planning Board. And we really realized pretty quickly that all of us were at various stages of understanding that the workforce was changing. So the simple idea of this coalition was trying to get a cross section of organizations across Waterloo Region. So we had the academic institutions involved. We had companies that were public organizations and private organizations of all various sizes, including the participants here. And the ethos of what we were trying to do was just trying to help each other along the journey to understand what were some of the trends that were happening in the workplace. And how could we actually work together to advance the knowledge and also, practically apply some pilots, et cetera. So, we started in January. We kind of formalized that we were going to work together as a coalition in November of 2019. So again, before the pandemic, and then we just started our work. And we thought, again, we'd have some time to adapt to us. But then, I can remember in March having this conversation with the group saying, I think things are going to fundamentally change, not knowing what it was. And some of the conversations prior to March was pretty interesting. Like I remember talking to some groups that said, we can't work from home, right? Like that, I don't know how we would possibly, have our people work from home, we wouldn't know what they're doing. How do we track their work? How do you build collaboration? And I think, March taught us that, and beyond has taught us that we can do that. So one of the projects that we focused in on, which I think is where we're probably going to dig into today, was there's a lot of different topics we were trying to tackle from a future of work perspective, but one that really, resonated with all of the organizations, particularly as we headed into kind of August, July and August of 2020, was everybody was trying to figure out this remote and eventually hybrid way of working. And I know some organizations were even from the beginning, weren't necessarily working remotely and working hybrid, but we started to talk about how do we help each other navigate all the different aspects of working in a remote and hybrid environment. And we spent about 4 or 5 months at the beginning of this year helping each other out in a community of practice where we brought, again, those 19, 20 different organizations together. And we started kind of looking at what were some of the common themes that we were running into. And we ran some facilitated sessions to help each other out. So I'm not going to go too much into the details on the findings of that. I think we'll get to that during the conversation, but that's just kind of the context. It was a very broad discussion around future of work. One of the particular topics around remote and hybrid work. And that was something we dug deep into, which has now informed, I think, a lot of what we're using to help out our companies from a Communitech standpoint. And I think also, Exonify and Workforce Planning Board and the Chamber are now starting to share that information as well, out as well.
What's interesting about that, and then I'm going to go to Charlene and Andrea, is as we got started, it didn't feel like it was a watershed thing we were talking about. It was, as you pointed out, it was something into the future. The watershed moment was COVID, because we had no option. Everyone had to work at home. And I think that's the collective of everyone saying, well, how would we do this? And Communitech and the leadership that you've shown in that. But it's been a watershed moment for everyone, for public institutions, for the private sector, for small business, for communities. And the other part I just want everyone to understand is Communitech, there's still, I think, some in the community that say Communitech and it's just tech or software. Communitech has really stretched itself as being a community facilitator for all of business, recognizing that everyone, it doesn't matter what part of business you're in, you're leveraging technology and how people use technology for different sectors. And I think that's where this, I think it's become we've put a spotlight on that of the leadership that yourself and Communitech have had of saying, we have to have that available for every business and organization that works with business. So maybe that's a good segue for Charlene. Charlene, we work on issues related to every business sector, and the work that you've done with the Workforce Planning Board of Waterloo Wellington, because everyone's got different needs as it relates to what the future of work. If you're in a manufacturing setting, it's a lot different than if you're a small business or retail, or if you're in various different parts of the economy, it will look and feel different. What's your observation of in terms of getting involved in the coalition? What were the aspects you wanted to bring and raise with the group, and by extension for the community and for all of business?
I think what I really wanted to focus on when I joined was there was a lot of talk at our table, but there was a lot of academia, there was a lot of finance, there was a lot of tech sitting at the table. And so I kind of hoped that in joining that I could provide the perspective of, okay, that works there. So how do we make that idea appeal to a manufacturer or a construction person who's not considering these ideas yet? Because before the pandemic, they just weren't. And then how do we make sure, because a lot of our people on the coalition were urban, how do we make sure that this also reaches out to those people who are rural and those businesses that are rural and like being rural? So I think that's why I really got involved, is to make sure that those other little pieces that, and I'm not saying they were purposely missed or anything, but when you start working in certain environments, sometimes those perspectives don't come up to the top. So I know sometimes when we were sitting in meetings, I'd be like, okay, but how does that work here? And everyone would go like, that's a really good question. How does that work there? So I think with our work, we've been really trying to make sure that everyone's represented. And we've really been trying to provide data. So the Employer One survey this year is really going to give us some determinants that'll help us figure out where we are as a community on a lot of the issues out there. So we can start to put together or work with the region and places like that to put together strategy to make sure Waterloo stays on top as it keeps going into the future.
I think that that's an important point, and it's something that as a chamber, which the vast majority of our members are, would be 20, 25 employees or less. In fact, most would be 10 employees or less. And that's where a lot of our comments and the work that you do, because you're working with a lot of those small, medium-sized companies too, is it's great that we're talking at a big level with academia and larger organizations, and they can pilot things out. But how do we get that through to the small business owner? Because that's where 50% plus of all the jobs, or 60% of all the jobs are, as well as the volume of business. So, and again, we work closely with the immigration partnership too, right? Like what are individuals seeing about what their skills need to be as newcomers to the country? What are they going to need to do to be full participants in the economy as the talent that's going to drive our economy? So that's a focus of ours as well. I think both you and I always say, okay, that's great, but how do small businesses or people that are not part of it right now? And that's important part of the discussion, because the role of larger organizations that can pilot things out and try new things, that needs to happen, because small business don't have the resources to do it. But then how do we make it scalable for those smaller businesses? So following in that, Andrea, one of the reasons you're on the board of the chamber, recognize that small business part, but also come from that innovative, with Carol Lehman and others at Exonify, the innovation that needs to happen, whether it's on learning and training and the things that you're doing. Was that the focus of Exonify wanting to get involved in this Future of Work and Learning Coalition?
Yes, absolutely, Ian. Knowing Exonify, we always want to be a good community partner. That's been our values from the very beginning. We work or have spoken with Carol Lehman. We want to give back to the community, and part of that is sharing our learning. So, we wanted to be in part of the coalition as a good community partner, and as well to be able to apply and trial things at our size that we can then parcel out to small organizations. And we've done that with the work with the chamber check program and other platforms. So it's just part of us being a good community partner and sharing our learnings. I like to view this as crowdsourced learnings, and we're all dealing with humans and in different work environments and work experiences. And so I think, we can all benefit from the different size and stage of companies, and sharing that for the greater good of our region.
So let's pivot a little bit for each of you. I'll start with you, Charlene. What does this new work environment look like for your own organization? Like, I think we'll talk at high level in some respects here, but we all have staff, and we're all like Communitech's got lots of folks in there. There's a hub. Charlene, you've got a staff. You're working across it. What does this new environment look like for you and the Workforce Planning Board?
So to give some context, we're the smallest employer sitting here at the table with a whole 6 of us. So it's a little bit different. We don't need to worry about bringing the leadership team on board, because I'm it. So it's for us, it's really been about thinking about where the pandemic gave us the chance to look at where we could have glitches and suddenly becoming flexible. So we took that as an opportunity to kind of work through those pieces. We were already thinking about going flexible or some sort of hybrid model before the pandemic. So this really accelerated our plans. And so now my staff are actually active participants in how our whole environment looks like. So, we've decided when we would like to come back as a team. We have decided what that looks like. We have decided what days and what model we want going forward. So we're looking at a 3 in, 2 from home, and everyone gets to see me once a week. So we think that's the best model for our small team.
Listen, I want to say perspective is everything, because a 6-person shop looks like the great white shark if you're a solo practitioner or have 1 or 2 employees. So we can all learn from one another. Andrea, let's go back to you. I mean, what is this new work environment? And you've probably been more on the leading edge because you're a startup and you're a relatively young company as a startup. But what does this new work environment look for you and your crew?
Yeah, for sure. We moved to hybrid and we did this move last July. So we, to Charlene's point around active participants, we went out to survey our employees and we've done that throughout. I think that's any company at any size can just really ask and involve their employees in that decision-making model. And so we made a decision to move to hybrid, and we haven't indicated which days. We just had indicated a minimum expectation of time in office because we believe that there is value of in-person meetings in the office. Is just now aligned to a different interpretation of what the office is used for. So we've been now operating this way for a year, and we're still learning as we go. I like to say test, learn, and iterate, or the agile way of working is because there are some glitches and some behavior changes that we have to work through, and as well ensuring that we have the right infrastructure from technology, and that is an important consideration as well.
Just before I go to Simon, I'm going to do a little public service announcement. I did see in the chat box someone sent a note, and I'll get our question around making sure we're monitoring or staying in touch with employees around. So we'll come to those. I'll try and aggregate those as we go along. So, but just for anyone that's there and has a question that's watching in today, please feel free to put that in the chat box. I don't pay attention a lot, my staff tell me, but in this case, and for you and for this audience, I absolutely am doing that. So Simon, you guys are interesting because you're a larger outfit, but you're in your own facility. You're also got a lot of, tenants that are smaller businesses. So you got a variety of aspects that you're having to manage, but tell us about what the new environment looks like. And I know as you're coming back to work, you've got some new safety issues, but what are you doing as a team for Communitech? How have you adapted to this new environment?
Yeah, so if we start with the team first, for predominant, we've had the good fortune of being able to work predominantly remotely, work from home since the pandemic started. We do have facility staff who have to take care of our tannery and our data hub, which is in Kitchener and Waterloo. But for the most part, we've been working remotely, and a lot of what we spent our time on is trying to really shift how we work and shift some of our practices and norms so that they are more conducive to a remote environment. When it comes to how we're going to, come back to office, we will be a remote environment, a hybrid environment. And so we're looking at what we're calling a 2-1-2. So we were looking for 2 days where people come into the office, 1 day that's kind of flexible in terms of where you work, and then 2 days where you're working at home. To Andrea's point, we've leaned a lot more towards the flexibility part of it. Because it's a very competitive talent landscape, and I think it's a competitive talent landscape for everybody, not just tech. Yeah. So a lot of people, I'd argue, have spent some time really reflecting on what they're looking for in their careers and in their lives during this period of COVID. So I think most of a lot have landed on flexibility as being a key part of that. And so we have talked to, we've been working with companies within a Communitech membership as well as the community, but we span companies of 1 or 2 people who are just starting up a company all the way to larger enterprise organizations. But what we're hearing consistently across is they're trying to think about this from a talent perspective, because it is a really hot talent landscape. And then to your other point about the additional complexities that we have as Communitech is we have tenants and we have visitors, right? So we have to contemplate what does health and safety look like, and the hybrid environment look like, not only for our teams, but also for our tenants and for visitors to the hub. And we believe as well that there's an important part of the overall experience that is in person and collaborative, but again, balancing that out with the need for flexibility.
So moving on, and we'll start with Andrea on this one. As business start to think about going back in office, so you've been doing the hybrid, but you've at some point would have gone through that. So how did you determine what was best for the business? Because I think there's competing interests here. I mean, my own staff, a lot of them, when I was doing my check-ins and reviews at the end of our fiscal year, was I'd really like to work at home forever. And they sort of miss being together, but we've worked hard at that. But so there's that component of saying that might be more convenient for me. And then as the operating the business, saying, you miss some things by not being together, that opportunity to interact and maybe do some things. But what are some of the, like, that's one of the considerations, what's good for the business, what's good for the employees. So how do you decide what's best for the business? And I guess it depends on what sector you're in. And just, I guess the theme of this question is, how do you get started to try and pull it together and say, what's the first thing I'd write on a blank piece of paper about how we get to whatever the new normal is?
Oh, for sure. So I think first, survey your employees, find out what they need that they need to help engage, that you need to understand their sentiment around the flexibility that they may have enjoyed or how they enjoyed this past year. So you can say, how have you moved your work assignment to your new location? What's working for you, what's not? How many days do you anticipate wanting to come to the office? If you had access to the office, what benefits do you see, right? So I think it's just asking some questions to start with the sentiment of, where are your employees at? And then also as part of that, just in terms of the communication, be honest with the types of work that you see would be best suited to be in the office versus not. And for us, we have some roles that are more office centric. So facilities, front desk, IT help desk. So some of the things are the nature of the role. So we did speak to that as part of our initial communication role, as part of setting that, change management to give them some understanding. So I first would start with surveying your employees.
So Simon, same question to you. I mean, as and whether you use it as what you've learned from the Future of Work and Learning Coalition or what you've done as Communitech, because you've done some of what Andrea's talked about. What do employees want? What do tenants want? Well, how do you decide what's best for the business, the operations of the business, and where did you guys get started, or how did you get started?
Yeah, so in some of the community of practice work that we did with the 20 kind of companies where we started sharing best practices, some common themes came out. We did some peer-to-peers with some of our CEOs of our companies to get a sense of what their questions were, and it was very interesting. Some of the reactions were, I'm going to pick hybrid, I'm going to pick remote. And if you dug a little bit further, some of it, particularly for smaller companies, the reason why they were choosing one or the other was a bias towards what the CEO's preference was, right? They had a preference towards remote, or they had a preference towards in person. And so we started to really, get companies to think more about what's your business strategy. And I'm not talking about big company business strategy, but basically, what are you trying to focus on? How are you delivering your services? What does your sector look like? And think about it from a business strategy perspective, but also from a talent perspective. Because I go back to harping on the talent side of things. We can assume that we're in an environment whereby I can only hire someone that's within, a 50 or 60 kilometer radius of where I am. That's changed now because of COVID. And I think many businesses, whether you're in tech or not in tech, have or have not, there's been a gradient in terms of how much we've embraced that, right? I was talking to a small business that's a non-tech small business just this morning. And they were talking about how they have specialized skill sets when it comes to things like fundraising. And they hired someone who was experienced and they're working out of Canmore, right? And they're fully remote. So when I think about where to start, it's thinking about what's your business objective? What are you trying to accomplish? What sector do you work in? What, to Andrea's point, what roles need to be in person? What roles could be remote? And then I think about the talent attraction angle and the retention angle. So from an attraction standpoint, this might actually be an opportunity for you to get at skills that you can't source locally or can't source easily, right? You can, again, if you're in a different environment, you can go after talent that lives not only in, broader in Ontario and Canada, et cetera. So thinking about what that looks like. And then on the retention side of things, having a look at your teams, whether they're a team of 6 or whether they're a team of 100, where do you have retention risk? There's been a lot of talk in the media about, the Great Resignation, where you have, the numbers are all over the place, but up to 40% of people who are contemplating leaving their roles. So if you have certain people who are really important to your business, they're critical to your business, and they're in demand in terms of their skill set, then you're probably going to want to think about, how much flexibility you provide. So I think in kind of the business side of things, the talent side of things, and then you land on where do you want to be in terms of in-person, hybrid or remote? And then from there, how much flexibility do you give based on how you want to attract talent, based on how you want to, what your retention needs are? Once you kind of figure that part out, then you get into, what's my health and safety look like? What's the employee experience look like? But start with the kind of the strategy and your talent play first is most of what we've been talking to our organizations about.
As a CEO and a minister's kid, doing more talking than listening is always a risk. But I think that's an important thing, is what your employees and what your business is telling you is the model that's going to work best for your business, because they're the ones that need to be productive, and that's good advice. Charlene, same question. Like, when you're talking with businesses, because it would look a lot different if you're a manufacturing base or construction or some of those types of businesses versus tech or services at home where remote is just, you intuitively would say, well, if I'm an accounting firm, I know I can work, because I can more easily do that. It's a lot more difficult in a lot of other sectors to determine what those, what's best for the business, how to best operate. What's your observation on that?
I think I forget which, I think it was Andrea said it, knowing what the employee is doing, I think is the first step on that one. If you're running a manufacturing shop and they need to be in because they need to weld, it's probably going to be much easier to run the health and safety if everybody's there, let's be honest. And not many people have welding shops set up in their home. So I think this is where that becomes so important. So when you start looking at that return to work and keeping those people, there's still some people we're going to have to recruit locally. But maybe if you can take part of your engineering side of your business and make them remote, then you can take those dollars, time, and effort to refocus on how you're going to better attract and retain that workforce that needs to show up every day in a society that seems to really want to be removing to working. They want to move to working from home. So I think it's going to give businesses the opportunity to look at those strategies and say, okay, here's where we can put the effort. Here's where we need to put the effort, because this group, we can probably meet most of their needs through this function. So I think that's going to be an important part moving forward, is really looking at the talent, because we seem to be moving into, we kept hearing about it for years and years about the talent shortage. I think we're here. And so if you haven't been prepping, you're going to have to figure out that strategy in the next couple months, because it's not going to alleviate itself with only 30,000 immigrants coming in every month across Canada. So, you're really going to have to think local, and you're really going to have to think about who's there if you have to bring that talent in. And I hate saying it, relooking at your pay grids. It's probably going to be a big factor over the next couple months.
So Andrea, a little bit of both here is, as a company, tech companies to start up. My understanding, if I'm not, you've had employees from all over. It's not all local employees. Charlene's talking about maybe a welding shop or manufacturing where there is floor. You got to be on the floor making stuff, but you could have others that work remotely. One of the questions that came in on the chat box is talking about that we're into this global remote workforce now. And I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we were talking about that as the future, Simon, way back in 2018 and 2019. Well, the future's here and it's not going away. So, but Andrea, for that same question, like where to get started, but how do you kind of make sure that as you're having some people that are more remote, that you're, what's the implication for retention, and how do you keep them engaged and get in the culture of Axonify when they're not physically there? I think that'll be one of the questions that many CEOs or business owners or innovators or small business owners that are creating these businesses and trying to grow them, that'll be a concern for them.
Oh, 100%. And we certainly haven't figured out. Again, it's just trial and error. I think lean into empathy and listening of leaders and of your employees, like by your leaders, demonstrating that. And I think a lot of things we are doing already, and I'm sure other companies are as well. Like, so give yourself some credit. But we came up with a belonging program, and we broke it into work streams. Like there's the community aspect internally, meaning like how do we create opportunities for connection on an individual, team, department, and org wide. Then we came up with the other C that we have as context, and that is what information can we get out there to help Axonifiers, as we call ourselves, have a greater awareness and understanding of where the business is going. I think that's very important, because if they buy into that vision of your company, you know, that's part of the talent engagement and retention. And then then we have a program celebrating moments that matter from a personal and a business milestone recognition. So i.e. job changes, promotions, but also, you know, if you're getting married or having a child. So we created a program that kind of bucket the things that we do to ensure that we can cover off things in a new virtual way. We didn't do a copy and paste of how we were very office centric before. We really believed in bringing people together, and we've had to really, really think through, well, no, we have employees and teams that are across Canada now, in the US and the UK, and we have to think about how do we engage those. And it will look different from a team to a team, and we have some staples that are the same from an org-wide perspective. So, you know, like, I think it's just trial and error, and you know, coming up with ways that you can build connections.
I think that's important, is recognizing right off the top. I try and do this with our own staff, saying, don't know what the future is going to hold. Here's our best thinking right now around when we would reopen, because, you know, their safety, the safety of our members. And so that always leaves you a bit of room to say, oops, we didn't quite get that right. Or here's how we're going to pivot. So that's some good advice. Charlene, I wanted to pivot a little bit to health and safety, and the, you know, the on your experience, what are some of the key health and safety precautions employers need to consider when returning to the office? I mean, that will, and it may, obviously some would be COVID, but when we haven't been in the office for a while, we tend to forget some of the things that we should, I would assume. So what are you hearing and talking with employers about?
I think when I've talked to employers, and even when we started our first reopen way back when, it all came down to what risk was, you know, where are the risks? So, you know, identifying the entry points of the virus, you know, do you have customers? Do you have tenants like Simon does? What your staff are an entry point, delivery people, and, you know, and then it's monitoring how to minimize those people actually bringing in the virus. So, and, you know, there's a lot of policy development that needs to be done. You may have an infectious disease policy in place, and that kind of does cover COVID, but I've also seen some employers who want very COVID specific policies developed. You know, risk reduction. How do you have somebody report that they've possibly encountered somebody? How do you communicate that out to your staff? Because, you know, you want to protect the privacy of that person. And I know in our environment, we're 6 people. If somebody doesn't come to work, you know, it's kind of off for 2 weeks. That looks, you know what it is. So, you know, that sort of opportunity as well. And also the Ministry of Labor, Training and Skills Development has a really great safety plan template that we went through. And then that helped us identify where we were not as strong on our reopening, and where we could go back. I think also, I've seen in the past couple of weeks that we've gotten a little bit lax with our masks. You know, we're starting to see, you know, vaccination rates of 70–80% of 12 and up. But having a 10-year-old at home who's terrified to go downtown, you know, we got to start putting them back on and retraining our staff that this is, if they're coming back to the office, it's back to masks when you leave your desk. And it's, you know, we're using the COVID tests, the rapid tests that were given by the chamber once a week. And that'll help, even though we're all vaccinated, just because I have a small staff, and they all tell me, we'll feel a little bit better. So it just creates one more layer of protection. And I think if we start doing that as small businesses, then we're going to make our staff feel better, and we're going to make our customers feel better. And I think with vaccination passports coming out, I think we have to think as a community about how to give our staff the power to refuse people and be backed and supported when it comes to customers who maybe do not agree with that measure being put out there. So I think that's one area where we may see some health and safety concerns, more from a harassment perspective than an actual physical safety piece.
I see in the chat box, and we'll share this when we send the this video out, the template for this that you've just referred. I think Nina put it up there, so Jenna or our gang will make sure we include that in the development. You touched on something, and maybe I'll go to Andrea and Simon on this. Because part of what you did is the confidence. It's belt and suspenders time. You may have been vaccinated, but you still got to wear a mask, and you should probably still do rapid screening, because it doesn't mean that you're bulletproof, and it doesn't mean you can't spread the virus. So I think in all those things, that's what we've been saying is, wear a mask, do the testing, get vaccinated, use the vaccine verification. Everything is in service of keeping business open and people safe. Confidence is a big part of this reopening, and staff need to feel confident. Customers need to feel confident. But if we think about this from the business perspective for Andrea and Simon, mental health is a big issue, and the confidence of staff coming back to work. So regardless of what you decide, full remote, some hybrid, which most will probably go back to, the confidence mentally for employees coming back. Am I going to be safe? I'm going to bring something home to my family. So one of the questions that sort of came in was around how do you, and I don't know whether surveillance is the right term, but how do you monitor your own staff and their, from a mental health perspective, and that they're feeling connected? Is there technologies? Is it what are the things you're doing for those people that are remote, I guess is the question I have. Because identifying mental health issues is very difficult on a flat screen here. It's a lot easier when you can see the body language and the whole person. But I think mental health we've seen in this is a part of what Charlene's talking about. How are you keeping safe? So maybe Andrew, you want to take a stab? That wasn't on we hadn't discussed this, but I thought I'd throw a curveball to you. So
no, for sure. Simon, you can jump into, it's absolutely top of mind for all of us in that we've all been through 18 months and, feeling that disconnection. And that's one of the reasons why we opened our office, because from a mental health perspective, we had employees that raised their hand and said they needed to come in, they wanted to be in and have a bit of that human connection. They could be working by themselves at home or have no roommates or family, in that close proximity. So, and one of the things that we did as well is also leader training. So where I mentioned earlier about listening and leaning into that empathy, you get a sense of a pulse check. So if an employee is appearing to be, more than a week or so, not appearing to be themselves, or more quiet or more extreme from their personality perspective, we gave some leader training to say, how you could support or inquire to how they are doing, and then redirect to appropriate resources. But for us, it's, that really creating that connection and that belonging to help support, but creating that environment where people feel comfortable sharing how they're doing, but also creating those connections that as I mentioned earlier, is quite important.
Simon?
Yeah, so I double down on what Andrew said about the leadership part of it. We've been talking a lot about how leadership's going to matter even more now than ever before, because if you're, when you're in an in-person environment, you're going to see your leader, but you're going to see all your other colleagues, you're going to see people around. Like, there's other parts of your experience that are not your leader that are much more prominent in person. Whereas in a remote or a hybrid environment, your world is a little bit smaller, and more of your experience is your leader. So, getting back to really fundamentals around leadership, clear communication, checking in on people to make sure you're building that relationship is the way to kind of get at some of those things. The other thing that I think is important when we think about, the mental health part of it and just anxiety in general is most people have anxiety when it's a situation where they're unsure or uncomfortable and they don't know what to expect. Right. So I think there's a couple of things that we can, organizations can think about here. One is just, again, the clear communication around setting expectations around if you're going to return to office, what does that look like? How much notice will you provide? What are the supports that you're going to give, et cetera? So again, that general expectation setting. But the other thing too is, one of the things we did at Communitech to help people, visualize what it would be like to come back to the hub was we had a co-op student, and we had one of our team members actually do a walkthrough with the video camera and actually do a video walkthrough of the different spaces within the building and just narrate, like, here's some quiet space, here's what desks look like. Because the things we forget about is there's probably people that we've hired along the way during the pandemic that may never have seen the physical space, right? So the things that we're doing were really around trying to help people visualize and kind of give them a sense of what it would be like to return to the office as much as possible, to try to alleviate some of their anxieties and fears. And so those are the things to think about, I think, as organizations think about returning to offices, getting a sense of what is creating anxiety, and are there ways that I can do that, help shift those expectations or help them visualize those expectations so that it's not the first time they're seeing it, they're not the first time experiencing it, and that you're demystifying a lot of the anxiety, and that's helped kind of, reduce people's anxiety level as they think about and contemplate returning back to office.
It's a very good point. We had 2 co-op students who I never physically met and worked for us for 8 months. And we've hired 2 new people that full-time that I still have yet to see eyeball to eyeball. We've only met over. And so you're right. I mean, they wouldn't even know what the office necessarily looks like, or how it, what the buzz is in our office space, because they've never been in it. Okay, we're fast running out of time. You guys are doing an awesome job. Let's the last, or not last one, but the one I wanted to kind of get each of you to kind of weigh in on. We've touched on it, but I think that there's in my view, the hybrid model is likely to be the predominant, where it's neither all back or all at home. I think it's going to be some version of hybrid. I think that's the consensus I hear. It's what I think you're hearing. So let's talk about, what does that hybrid work environment look like? And we've touched on this. So it may be somewhat repetitive, but there may be other things. What's the goal of the hybrid model for a business? And maybe we'll start with you, Andrea. So what does it look like? Not necessarily just for your business, but your colleagues. And what should be the goal to get people should be looking at?
Yeah, for sure. I think the goal, we touched on before, is, balancing business needs with employee engagement, right? So it's you need to decide that for your organization. What does that mean? And it isn't a one size fit all approach. Like, flexibility isn't the same for everybody as well. So that's an important consideration. So what Charlene mentioned around, is there flexibility that you could bring to those that are in the weld shop versus those that are on your engineering team? So they may have input to that. So just, again, take that into consideration. And I think also with the goal of hybrid is look at things where it may not be working well. And for us, we really have to take a hard line of how we do meetings, right? People are tired of being on camera all day. And so it's an important way. We are still working through what does that look like. So I think just be clear as to your expectations of what hybrid is, and where there are some things that you need to still work through. So be clear in that communication. To Simon's point earlier around, clear communication is kindness.
Charlene?
I think I'd agree with most of what Andrea said. I think for a smaller business, it may be also about really considering what you can do tech-wise. There's some really small budgets for technology out there, and so having to dig to determine what your staff can use at home and what they can use in the office, and what do you need licensing for and what don't you. And there's some great companies out there that offer discounts for nonprofits and things like that. But I would agree, it's a really great chance to come together and have that congeniality as a team, but at the same time create that flexibility. I said we're going in 3 and 2 and there's a schedule, but if somebody has to go pick up their kid, go home, work from home, that's okay. Or there's a really big meeting and we're rural and we have rural internet, so it's better that you take the meeting at home and fully participate, rather than feel you have to come into the office that day. So I think building into that flexibility model, weighing what you have to do as an employer and what you can do versus what your staff need from you to ensure that they have the best functioning work environment and you can retain them, I think seems to be our big challenge, as we've discussed a couple times.
Simon, you can weigh in on that if you want, but the other part, I mean, coming up there, I think technology is a big part of it, especially for those small and medium-sized businesses who may not be as advanced. There's some great tools of which Communitech and Ian Klugman led during this pandemic, Digital Main Street, and working with the Toronto Board of Trade and ourselves to make sure those small businesses got the advice of what they needed to do, not only for remote, but for being more productive and opening up markets beyond their shop front, as an example. So maybe touch on a little bit of that technology piece.
Yeah, so I think to kind of maybe meld the 2 points together. I think it's really about the hybrid gives us the opportunity to preserve and optimize on the good things that came out of remote, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think we all know that we're gonna, the economy is going to become, and already is, a digital economy. So how do we actually learn, and how do we use this as an opportunity to bring those things that actually help us in terms of our productivity, our happiness, our business productivity when it comes to leveraging technology, but also being mindful of what were the things that were really, really important that are in person that we need to maintain, right? So I think it is really around if you wanted to kind of paint a pie in the sky goal, it's actually preserving and preserving the unlocked potential that COVID gave us, because there are things that it gave us in terms of adoption of technology, greater family balance, flexibility, et cetera. How do you preserve those things while maintaining the things that that we know still need to be core in terms of our businesses, whether it be for our employees or serving our customers? I think if you can find that right balance, and I think Andrea's right, it's not a one size fits all. I think there's a lot in this around being intentional, right? It is a moment for business owners to be intentional and pause to think about, where do I really want to take my business, and pause and say, what kind of environment do I want to build for my people to attract and retain the best?
Okay, we are down, and I warned you about this. This is the rapid fire rounds. Okay, so we got 2 questions and we got 3 minutes. So about 45-second each, although these are maybe more on we'll categorize these as tips or rules of thumb. So I'll start with Charlene. How can businesses best support their employees, whether they're remote, in person, accommodations? You touched on this a little bit around, kids or, elderly parents. I mean, there's all of those pieces. What's your advice around to support employees in this new environment?
I think it's just listening to them. I think that's been my model moving forward is, if I've got a really truly open door policy, my staff are going to come to me, whether I'm a team lead or I'm an executive. They'll come to me, they'll tell me, and then sit with them together and work out a win-win situation. And if that's, you get to go home for the day because so-and-so is sick, or you need to take your mom to a doctor's appointment, you create that, okay, well, you're going to make it up at the end of the day. That's cool if that's the environment that works. And I think even with manufacturers, there may be opportunities to look at these things as well.
And I think things like, when you're sick, stay at home. We've learned that lesson awful quick, is that we don't go to work when we're sick. Andrea.
I think my theme may have been just testing and learning. That's kind of where we're at. And maybe that's because of the tech side that we bring to it, but we don't profess to get it right. Like, don't look for that perfect solution right out of the gate. Just know that you want to just iterate as you get feedback.
Simon.
2 things quick in the spirit of rapid fire. I think to summarize, it's focusing on outputs, right? Agreeing on what the output is and not worrying as much about how people are doing it. Give them the flexibility, but be clear on what the business objectives are and what needs to be done. So focus on the outputs. And the other one is to maybe just in terms of just everything here, all our businesses are focused on the same thing. We're all struggling with the same issues, whether we're 2 people or 1,000 people. So do what you can to leverage other resources, to leverage your network, talk to others, because everybody else is kind of everybody's trying to work through this and feel their way through this as we go. So it's better to test and learn together than to do it separately, in my opinion.
Okay, and we're going to in the chat box, but we'll add this when we send this out to people and post it on our website. There's some links that Nina and some others have put in there. But in the last, give you each 30 seconds, and then we're going to wrap up. If your own organization or company has resources available to businesses, let us know where people can find that, or a tip or 2 about where to get those things. So we'll start with Simon.
So you can go to communitech.ca. We've got a page called Get Back to Workspace. It's actually a compilation of all the resources, articles, tools, tips, et cetera, that we pulled together through the community of practice. through the coalition. And you can also sign up for regular updates. And we have events like Ask Me Anythings along these subjects. So it's all free resources, but it's there for you to use.
Charlene.
I was going to say, if you check out Public Health Ontario, they do have some templates that can help you out. I recommend getting those rapid test kits from the chamber. And finally, we have a work from home series, and I think our next session's within the month, and it's hopefully bringing in HR consultants to talk about some of that policy development, which seems to be always a pain for small companies.
Good stuff. Andrea.
Well, both of those two are absolutely great resources, and I helped contribute, or the team helped contribute to the work that's on Simon's website, so I go there quite often. So recommend the community practice. And
since Exonify doesn't toot its horn enough, I encourage you to go to chambercheck.ca or Communitech, because you can get free masks, you can get free rapid screening kits, which you can have made available for your employees as part of your return to work. There's also the Chamber Business Ready, which is powered by Exonify, which is available to any business, not just chamber members, any business. And we've got information as well, an ambassador program of how to put your safety plan together to keep your staff, your employees safe, which the region of Waterloo is working on. So go to chambercheck.ca for all those tools. Communitech, the Waterloo Wellington Workforce Planning Board, and those tools, and we'll aggregate this all and have this available as for others that missed this session. But we'll leave it there because I know we all have to dash to another meeting in about 90 seconds. So give me 30 of it, because I'm going to say thank you, Charlene and Simon and Andrea, for joining us today. That does bring us to the end of the session. Once again, as I say, these things don't happen without the tremendous support of our business community. So a big thank you to our title sponsor for the series, Manulife, our platinum sponsor for the series, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region, and today's sponsor, Gowling WLG. And finally, to all of you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do host a new Business Success Series session every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Next week, we'll be joined by Melissa Roth, a partner with Gowling WLG. Melissa will answer your questions about what employers can and cannot ask employees around COVID-19, vaccine status, all questions that many businesses have, other things to consider from a legal perspective as you're creating your return to work plan and policies. We hope to see you then. For full details and to register, please visit greaterkwchamber.com. Please do share this series with your friends and colleagues. Join us every Wednesday afternoon for another edition. And because if it's Wednesday, it's the Business Success Series. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great afternoon.